Good evening, everyone. This is Abhinav from Decibels Lab. I'm a BMS algorithm development engineer. And in today's webinar, we'll be covering one of the important topics when it comes to understanding cell behavior, the lithium ion cell behaviors, and that is understanding the internal resistance characteristics of a lithium ion cell. So in this, we'll be focusing on few very specific aspects. So starting with the electrochemical behavior, how how the internal resistance originates inside the cell, what are the causes of it, and what are the types. So all this will be explained using like a simple diagram of a cell, utilizing the electrochemical equations. So the fundamentals are covered there, just some basics, and then we'll go into understanding like what are the different factors, like so what all basically influences the uh, internal resistance inside a cell. We'd be like going through like few graphs as well, basically like seeing how the trend of the IR curve changes with respect to the age of the cell or with respect to the temperature or with respect to the operating conditions, like how fast you're charging or how fast you're discharging, things like these. So once we are through with these basics, then we come to the methods of estimating the internal resistance. So just as a overview, we'll be looking at the experimental methods. We'll be using just some sample diagrams, or you can say test diagrams to go through how the experimental methods will give us the internal resistance of the cell. Then we'll be going into understanding like the using of estimation algorithms. So there are some models out there. Basically, it is model based. So like how exactly the estimation algorithms work, and then real time estimation methods. So especially like currently in real time usage, how the IR is estimated. Then we'll come to like the some interesting part where we'll take some numerical examples, and the Excel files will be provided here in the chat box, so you can also have a look at it. The complete data sheet of two types of cells will be provided here. And once we're done with the numerical estimation, that is basically the calculation, we'll just have a like overview of the results. So like how the internal resistance varies when you calculate it. And yeah, that is like the the most important set of topics that will be covered in today's webinar. So before I proceed with the upcoming topics, yeah, I'm just requesting Vinayak to kindly share the poll questions. So they're like just 4 or 5 questions. So you can just take 2 minutes of your time to answer them. So please, requesting everyone to just take a quick scan at what are all these questions and just try to see what you have some basic idea of what is resistance and things related to resistance and like that. Uh, sure. Let's just quickly go through like the most likely answers, and we will see what the audience has answered. So the pertaining to question one, what is internal resistance inside an electrochemical cell? It is the resistance to the flow of ions. Electrons always go outside the cell, but if you're talking about internal resistance, it's the flow of ions. So coming to the second question, why is estimation of resistance important? So the answer for this is all of the above. Basically, IR, that is internal resistance of the cell, helps you in determining the cell condition, that is the health, or you can say the life of the cell. It helps in understanding how much heat and power loss is happening. So basically, joules heating. And also, you have to optimize the cell's operating window for getting the maximum life if you want your cell to last as many years and as many cycles as possible. So that is why so these are the reasons why it is important to estimate the internal resistance. The correct answer is all of the above. The three, what is the relationship between temperature and internal resistance? So here we see that many people have answered it is directly proportional. So keep that in mind that it is correct if you're looking at metallic conductors, but it is not the case with lithium ion or you can say electrochemical cells. It is inversely proportional. So as as temperature rises, your resistance actually decreases. So we will actually see that later on in this session with some graphs. And yeah, as the temperature of the cell, or you can say of the ambient condition also gets more and more hotter, you'll see that the resistance decreases. and it is opposite for the colder temperature. So when it drops, the temperature drops, the resistance rises. And in the fourth case, that is the fourth question, in which case is internal resistance higher? The answer to that is charge. In charge case, the internal resistance is higher. So we will see that again in the upcoming slides, like why that is the case. Uh, yeah, so this is the this is with respect to the poll questions. So yeah, moving on to the content of today's session. So like, what is the main reasons for internal resistance? So the main resistance can all of the resistances inside the cell, inside any electrochemical cell, can be like attributed to electrochemical reactions. So there is a bunch of reactions that will occur, and they are called as redox reactions. So these redox reactions are two separate reactions that occur at the electrodes, and this is classified into two. This is basically classified as a redox reaction, but if you split them and then see them individually, one is called as reduction reaction, the other one is called as an oxidation reaction. So like basically it all has to do with like how the ions and electrons are transferred between the anode and cathode. So basically reduction is like accepting the electrons, and oxidation is loss of electrons and ions. So that is like briefly summed up here in this diagram on the left side. So like here is the like simple breakdown of how it looks inside a lithium ion cell. So you have an anode where ions are sent from the anode to the cathode. And then you have, this is during discharge. And then during charge, you have ions that are sent from the cathode to the anode. Okay. So this entire phenomenon of transferring of ions, of generation of ions and electrons, all of this will result in internal resistance. Like they are classified into the following categories. So if you see, we have three types. One is called as the ohmic resistance. This is the resistance that is caused due to cell materials. So there are like many cell materials you can like find inside. One, most importantly, this is because of the material, like you can say the electrode material. Electrode material, right? So you can see in the image, it says here lithium cobalt oxide, and then anode, which is usually made out of like graphite or some carbon-based compound with like some like additives. Then we have inside the separator. The separator also has some physical properties that will cause some amount of small losses. And then we also have an electrolyte, right? So these are the main contributors for material, you can say resistance due to the material. Okay, so they act as physical barriers to the ions that is flowing inside. Okay, that is the main reason. That is like you can say one of the major contributors to the internal resistance. So we will actually see that using some diagrams later on. We'll try to understand how that particular portion contributes so much. So all of this, these are the physical materials, and because of that, there will be like some like losses, you can say, with the ions that is being like flowing inside. Then we have polarization. So polarization is basically like as we discussed earlier, it is basically the redox reactions that occur at the surfaces of these material. So basically, you can see anode and cathode. And on the anode, usually it is seen that oxidation happens. So I'll write OX here, and cathode will have reduction. So I'll write RE here. RE means reduction, and OX means oxidation. So the reactions themselves on the surface will cause like some amount of like losses by like uh, how that happens is that the material itself will consume some amount of ions. So those small number of ions that are like consumed there or are delayed in terms of getting activated inside, that will cause something called as polarization resistance. And this is because of the reactions. So in like very simple like understanding, it is basically because of the reactions on the surface. Okay. So then we have the third type, which is called as diffusion. Okay, it is also called as concentration. Okay, so basically concentration of ions will also act as a resistance. So it's basically like this. If there's a charge buildup on one side, which is more than the other side, then that charge buildup will also cause a resistance. So one simple example we'll see. So like, for example, we'll consider that there are ions being transferred from, say, anode to the cathode, right? So there is, over time, what will happen? There is like a charge buildup over here. Okay, so there is like positive charge buildup. Okay, you can see like so many ions will have come and settled towards this side. So over time, what will happen? The concentration will change. There is a concentration gradient. Okay, so you will notice that as you head more and more towards the cathode, you will notice that the rise in the number of ions will be like more. So because of that, what will happen is that instead of allowing some more ions to come and settle in, it will start acting as a resistance barrier. Okay, so you can say like some sort of a charge-based resistance. So that will cause something called as concentration-based resistance. Okay, this is because of the diffusion of ions. So this will also act as a resistance. Although it is like kind of minute, it is still going to act as some sort of a barrier, and it will still contribute to the resistance. So overall, these are the three like classifications, or you can say the types of resistance present inside any electrochemical cell. And particular to lithium ion cell, we will see that this polarization resistance is very pronounced. Like you can see, it is more like significant in this type of cell. Okay, so we will solve two examples later on. You will see that how the polarization resistance actually causes the voltage to like behave later on. Okay, so these are the causes, and you can say that these are also the types, or you can say the classifications of internal resistance. Okay. So moving on to the different influencing factors. So you can see here that the one of the most important factors we have to consider for the like understanding of the behavior of internal resistance inside a lithium ion cell is temperature. So its dependency on temperature is very important to be considered. So you can see how it gets affected, like you can see as and when the temperature changes. So you can see that the trend line is inversely proportional. So resistance rises as temperature drops. And the reason for this is because inside the cell, the electrolyte and the anode, the cathode, the separator all have certain level of reactions and all have certain level of activity, which is extremely like dependent on the temperature. So it's basically how much energy is present within the cell based on the temperature. So we know that there is more amount of energy content as in when you go on increasing the temperature. So if the temperature goes on increasing, then even the chemical reactions energy goes on increasing. And if the chemical reactions energy goes on increasing, then it has more energy to overcome all the resistance. That is why you can see that as and when the temperature rises, even you can see that the resistance drops. So you can see here, especially in this lower band, at the bottom of the graph. So like all 25 degrees and higher, you can see that the resistance is very low. And consequently, you can see that for like below 10 degrees, or you can say below 15 degrees, you can see that there is a significantly large rise in temperature, in resistance. So this is how the cell behaves in different conditions, in different temperatures, and this is how the resistance is affected. So this is with respect to ohmic resistance, and similar to that, we have polarization resistance as well, showing this similar trend that it is rising with decrease in temperature. So the same explanation is utilized here as well. It is very important because the battery management systems have to know that as and when the temperature drops, the resistance has to be calibrated according to the drop in temperature, or you can say rise in temperature. So there is like it should not be thought that okay, just because the resistance is low when the temperature is high, it is safe to operate it. That is not the case. Now this can cause like some sort of like a looping effect. Now because of this temperature, because the temperature is high and the resistance is low, it can cause the cell to have like you can say overreact. Okay, where it can boost the reaction beyond a certain point, which is like beyond the safety point. And because of this overreaction, it can like further heat up the cell, and that will eventually take it up to something called as a thermal runaway. thermal runaway is like a very dangerous phenomenon. Basically, it is like when the cell gets overheated to such an extent that it is not able to expel the heat, and yeah, it will cause the cell to blast. So it is always important that we regulate the temperature so that it is like within 35 to 40 degrees and above 15 degrees or 20 degrees Celsius. So that is actually the sweet spot for lithium cells. Okay. Uh, so this is with respect to temperature. And there is also another aspect we have to consider, that is called cycle life. So this is an influencing factor because the resistance of the cell will never be constant. It is always going to continuously fluctuate based on how many cycles we have taken for the lithium ion cell. Say, for example, like we are at 0 cycle, you can see it is like at the lowest. It is like expected to be within like, you can say 30 to 40 or 45 milliohms. And then after that, you can see that as in when the cycle life goes on increasing, like you can see the cycle count as in when it goes on increasing, it is approximately increasing itself by 1.1 times. Okay, approximately it is increasing by 1.1 times. So about 1.2 times. So that is actually the general trend that you can observe in lithium cells. So this is one more factor, one very major influencing factor, which even again, which has to be calibrated within the BMS. So like so that it's able to compensate for the like the life, the expected life, the runtime of the EV, and many things like that. Okay, so just like how ohmic resistance is affected, even though polarization resistance will be affected over the entire uh, cycle life. So this is basically tested for an NMC cell, nickel manganese cobalt cell, and this is from the LG brand. LG. So LG actually like they make lithium ion NMC cells for like scooters or two-wheeler or electric vehicles. So like here like 2600 mAh cell was actually tested up till 500 cycles, and it was depleted till the point where the resistance achieved this value like this, and then it was not no longer able to give the capacity as expected. So at the end, you could was seen that the capacity achieved something like 1850 mAh. Okay. So it was seen that below this, it was not able to sustain even small amounts of current, like before going into complete degradation zone. So that was a cell testing that was actually performed at our lab in Decibels, and this is the outcome that we have obtained from it. So one influencing factor for resistance is also your uh, operating cycle. So you can say the cycle life. And then finally, we have the discharging and charging current influence. So you can see in this graph, like how like there is a difference between the charging versus the discharging graph. So you can see discharge is lower and the charge is slightly higher. And the reason for this is because during charging, the ions have to tackle slightly higher amount of like resistance while being transferred from the cathode to the anode. And because of this, there is like slightly higher resistance. Okay, so there is a like a more detailed explanation regarding that in terms of electrochemical phenomena. We won't go too in depth into that. Instead, like just simply explain it is the resistance caused because of the reactions during charging, and they actually offer more resistance. So that's why during charging it is much higher. So you will see that they will say like you will see that many OEMs will say like do not fast charge always. Like they will say that once in every 100 cycles or like once in every 120 cycles, you can go for fast charging. Okay. The reason is because fast charging means this resistance curve will be much more much more significant. So because of that, the battery can degrade faster. And so in order to prevent that from happening, they say like optimally use fast charging, like say about within 80 to 100 or 100 to 100 every 100 cycles, you can go for fast charging. Yeah. So these are the influencing factors. So these are the main factors that can influence the internal resistance. There are like many categories under this also, like other operating conditions, like how much pressure, how much humidity, other things, other external conditions also, like how long you have gone for storing. So apart from like cycle life, we also have one more thing. It is called as storage. storage condition. So basically, like if you store for, say, for example, like 6 months to 1 year without using it, so what will happen to the battery pack? Its internal resistance will rise. Why is that? It will rise because inside the cell, like some amount of material will be consumed permanently. Like there will be like electrochemical reactions that will happen even though the cell or the battery pack is not operating. And inside the cell, when those reactions keep happening, they will continuously consume the material. Like electrolyte gets consumed, it will start forming small amounts of gases and coming out of the battery. The anode, the cathode, all these materials will crack up and start to form like small solid particles inside the cell, which will lead to further degradation, and then that will give, right, like permanently it will increase the internal resistance. Okay, so this is the uh, another influencing factor, that is storage. Okay, and of course other things like how fast you are driving. Like if you're driving incredibly fast in your electric vehicle, that can also influence like how your battery pack's resistance will rise. Even like other things are there which is not exactly within the control, and that is basically like manufacturing. Manufacturing is there. There is assembly defects. Assembly. Then there is something called as cell balancing. So basically, if the cells are not balanced, it can also like cause one cell to have more resistance than another cell. So that can like lead to like imbalance in the cells, and again further it can cause like depletion in the pack. So these are all of these are the influencing factors, right? So if you want to study what are all the effects of those influencing factors, if you want to study like where do we get all these this kind of information from, then there are so many equipments available in the market. So especially they supply to big OEMs. In India, you can see these like Ola or Ather, Simple Energy. These kind of companies actually they depend upon these kind of like third party suppliers like Newware or Semco, Hyoki. So these all companies actually provide cell testing and battery pack testing, grading, balancing, internal resistance matching, thermal testing equipments. All they supply all of this, and with these equipments, you are able to test the complete aspect of the lithium ion cell resistance behavior. That especially if you see at the bottom, this one, Hiyuki, the EIS also, EIS basically stands for electrochemical impedance spectroscopy. So this impedance spectroscope, basically, it gives the complete impedance distribution of the impedance of the cell over a wide frequency of current. Okay, so you have the current that will be varied at small frequencies like 0.01 hertz to like very high frequencies like 35 kilohertz. So basically, the current will be fluctuated in this frequency range, and then from there, like how the resistance behaves, uh, that will be like seen, and from there you get the complete internal resistance characteristics. This is in terms of what is called as ACIR. Okay, alternating current internal resistance. So it's AC current that is passed through the cell. This is actually not used in day-to-day life. It is only meant for research purpose and also meant for quality like assurance purposes. Like at the very fresh condition, it is seen using ACIR. So basically, something called as EOL or end of line testing. ACIR is performed, and the battery pack's condition is seen based on the resistance. So otherwise, if you're going for R&D and if you're going for applications in real time, most of it depends upon what is called as DCIR. Okay, so which is direct current internal resistance. Now, in this webinar, actually, we'll be focusing on the aspect DCIR. Okay, we'll see later on, like using some sample test data, like what exactly DCIR looks like, and then what is the test procedure. Like we'll be briefly seeing that. So these are all equipment that can help you measure the complete internal resistance characteristics. So not just in terms of like ambient temperature, but also you can see here minus 25 to plus 95, and also in different humid conditions as well. Okay. So these are the equipment can use. We are having these equipment at Decibels, and utilizing this itself, we are performing like a lot of cell testing and characterization, battery pack and testing and characterization. So basically for the application of two-wheeler EVs. So now we come to the methods of estimating the internal resistance. So there are like a lot of methods. So many of them, they depend heavily upon data-based. So no matter what kind of estimation method you actually take, it is still dependent upon some amount of data. And those are all data-driven methods. But like simply classifying them, you start with experimental methods. This is the simplest and the most direct method. Okay, so this is the most direct method. It's the simplest, and like you need an oscilloscope or DSO, the digital signal oscilloscope, or you can even say you need like some sort of a data storage device, which will show the complete variation of voltage with respect to the current profile, and from there you can get the resistance. Okay, so in experimental methods, there are two very important ones. It was just covered in the previous slide, that is DCIR and ACIR. Okay, these are the two methods. And amongst this, the most prominent method is DCIR. Okay, it's fast, it is quick, and it gives the data like in a very simple way. So data extraction and analysis is not it's not very challenging. It's pretty simple. If you use any software like MATLAB or Python, even Octave, free software, anything that can help you do the programming, then you can get the resistance values from this. Okay. So you can also find many online tools as well in the website. There's some curve fitting tools are there. So these curve fitting tools will actually help you extract the data from the DCIR. Okay, same thing to ACIR also. Basically, you get another ACIR oscilloscope. Okay, so these oscilloscopes, what they do is they provide AC signal. So AC signal, basically this will be like fixed at a particular amplitude, like a very small amplitude, something like 100 milliamps or like something like 50 milliamps. And the frequency is changed. And from there, at different frequencies, we'll get the resistance. Okay. So whatever data we get from this, initially, we can use it to like basically feed them into the estimation algorithms. So you basically take the data, say, for example, one time, in fresh condition, or basically like over the period of like say 50 or 100 cycles, and then we feed it into a program like any of these programs. So least squares is one of the most simple ones. You can actually like make a very simple least squares algorithm to fit into the BMS. Recursive filters, or you can use Kalman filters. Kalman filters is very effective in terms of tracing the resistance in real time. Then you also have neural networks, which is coming under AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Yeah, of course, other things like fuzzy logic also comes in, right? So we are having this kind of classifications, and we also have real-time estimation. So real-time estimation, like there aren't too many like well-defined ones, but like most commonly used one is the direct measurement. Direct measurement means like over an entire drive cycle, you're having a change in voltage divided by change in current, delta V by delta I. So that gives you the average resistance of the entire pack throughout the entire drive cycle. You can say a small portion of the drive cycle. Okay, that is coming under direct measurement. So apart from that, so Texas Instruments has defined a method which is called as impedance tracking and fuel gauging, and also called as impedance tracking. Okay, so impedance tracking means basically it takes in some data from experimental data, like as an initial starting point, and then from there onwards, like every few cycles, it'll keep updating the resistance by measuring the OCV, the difference between OCV and the terminal voltage. So within a particular SOC window. So like over time, we'll see that the terminal voltage will go on changing, like the trend line will go on like changing, as in to say you will see that there's more and more losses occurring, and that is recorded as a resistance. Okay, in very simple explanation. So actually in Decibels, we are actually working on this right now, where we have created a algorithm which traces the state of health using impedance tracking. So yeah, these are the different estimation methods. So like, yeah, so basically these methods are the most prominently used methods for internal resistance estimation. So right now, we'll focus on DCI, direct current, internal resistance. So we'll just take a simple example from a simple test case, and then we'll see like how exactly the graph of the internal resistance looks like. So before we go into that, we'll just quickly cover this. So you can see here how the ACIR signals and the DCIR signals look like. Okay, these are the profiles we feed into the DSO, that is the digital signal oscilloscope. And from there, we'll get the voltage output. And from that voltage output, we can get a resistance. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so now we'll come to the practical example. So when we see into the Excel sheet, you will notice that the voltage response looks exactly like this. So when we supply a small pulse of current, like for example, 10 seconds, you can see here the period of the current is 10 seconds. So when we supply that current, the voltage of the cell looks like this. The voltage response actually looks like this. Okay. And so to briefly categorize this one, we had seen earlier something called as ohmic, something called as polarization, and something called as charge transfer resistance, or you can even call it as a diffusion resistance. So that is classified over here. You can see this entire portion. Yeah, this contributes to ohmic resistance. So this is ohmic. Okay, so this is the largest contributor. Then we come to the other portion, that is what is called as the polarization. Okay, so you can see one particular like trend line here, that this portion is showing a slight curve. That is basically what is known as the exponential region. So this portion will always exhibit some small portion of exponential voltage drop. Okay, again, it has to do with the nature of the chemical reactions. Then we come to the last portion, that is this part. And this contributes to what is called as diffusion. Or also in other terms, you can see it is called charge transfer resistance. So this is how the entire resistance graph has been categorized and it has been split. Okay, so we will now observe that using the example. Okay, and we will use these set of equations also to like solve some like simple numerical also. Okay, yeah. So there are two cells actually which we have here. One is that we'll be performing a numerical analysis on a simple NMC cell, that is nickel manganese cobalt cell. It is an 18650 format type cell. And the other one is a LFP cell, which is lithium ferrophosphate cell. And it is of 22650 format. Okay. So we will now see it here. So this is an example file, and I'll be sending this example file to everybody. Please give me a minute. I will upload this file. Right. So this example file has now been sent to everyone in this particular session. So please give me a thumbs up if you can, if you have received all the file, if you've received this particular file. So in the meantime, okay. So here we will solve for some like simple equations here using that Ohm's law. So for NMC and LFP, you can see they're highlighted in like two different colors. So you can, if everybody has received the Excel file, you can please open this and try to solve along here. It's very simple. So you can actually identify the resistance like this. So just using Excel itself. So if I take this particular value that you see here, So this value is basically what is called as OCV, open circuit voltage. Okay, so this is the voltage that is actually the voltage just before the current pulse is applied. Okay, so you can see here the current, just like the corresponding value of current is 0. Okay, so at 0 amps, the measured open circuit voltage is 4 volts, 4.09 volts. Okay, so if I take this value and subtract it from the immediate next value, this value. Okay, so you can see here the value is 3.9612. That is upon application of the current, that is 3 amps, 3.1 amps, right? And if I divide this by the current, this value, I will get the resistance. Okay, so the resistance is 0.043 ohms, or you can say 43 milliohms. Keep in mind that this value is not supposed to be negative. It is showing that because the current value has been shown as negative here, but actually it is just a face value. It is supposed to be positive. Okay, so simply explained, the value here is 0.043 ohms. Okay, so this is at a particular SOC. Say, for example, 100% SOC. After I fully charge the cell, I can perform a pulse power characterization, or also what is called as a DCIR test. So once I perform this DCIR test, basically in that test, they will be like loading the cell with many pulses, like so many pulse of current will be provided. And in each pulse, the voltage response will be recorded. Okay. So the voltage response actually looks like this. So like just like this, you can see that for one single pulse of current, if the voltage response looks like this, then for like many multiple like pulses, like how the voltage response will look like. So basically, it's the same thing that is repeated at different SOCs. Okay. So if this is at like 100%, then like you can measure the same voltage response at say 90%, then at 80%, so on, till the voltage of the cell achieves, or you can say the SOC achieves complete 0%. So in the entire, like the entire SOC range, like you can say 100 to 0, you can measure the total ohmic and polarization and also the charge transfer resistance. Okay, so we saw example of how to solve for ohmic resistance. So this value that you're seeing, this is the ohmic resistance. Okay, so if I write it here, ohmic resistance. Okay, so next one will be what is called as a polarization resistance. So how do you identify polarization? So let me plot that graph once again. So in this graph, so you will notice that this is the vertical drop. This is, you can say, the instantaneous drop. There is a portion here where you can see that the response is a little bit curved, right? Or it's a bit exponential. Okay, so this portion is your polarization region. Okay, this is your polarization resistance, you can say PR. So this particular portion has to be estimated, like basically using the graphical analysis itself. So here you can estimate that shortly after, like say midway or slightly before the midway, there is a end in the like the exponential region. Okay, so there is no set and defined method that you have to use to identify that particular portion. You can use a small like estimate or like some sort of a guess using some like visual analysis itself to see where the exponential region ends, or you can say the curve portion ends. Okay, so in this case, you can take that V1 is here, so V2 will be here. Okay, this is V2. This is the portion where the exponential region will end. So now if you want to calculate polarization resistance, I will do the same thing that was done for ohmic resistance. So I will take this value, subtract it with this, and divide it by this value. Okay. So here you can see that your resistance, that is for the polarization resistance, is showing a slightly different and slightly a lower value. So as I told you that the contribution from the polarization resistance is slightly smaller. Okay, so the major contributor is always the ohmic resistance, almost always the ohmic resistance. Okay, so this is the polarization. Then there is the third portion, which we know it's going to be the charge transfer, or you can say even the diffusion resistance. But that is simple. So all you have to do is take the remaining bit, the remaining like portion. So this value minus the last value, the end of the pulse, divided by this value. And this will give me what is called as the diffusion resistance. Okay, so this is basically how we categorize the resistances. This is how we calculate it. Okay, and all of that will be done through obtaining the complete voltage profile from the DCIR. Okay, so this comes from a test called DCIR. Okay, so now we have calculated the like you can say the resistance like values at one particular SOC. Okay, so here like it is calculated for 100% SOC. Okay, so not almost near the full charge value. Okay, so same thing you can also carry out for the LFP cell as well. So you will notice that there is a slightly different trend for the LFP cell. So maybe you can try this as an exercise, or you can try this as a short assignment, and then try to plot the difference in voltage profiles, okay, and also the resistance profiles between the NMC and the LFP cell. Okay, so there is also like one complete DCR data that we get. Okay, so I will just plot this for you. So here you can see that your NMC cell has undergone DCIR testing. Okay, so this is a DCIR test, and as explained earlier, there will be like series of pulses. There will be like a lot of pulses, like some 40 to 50 different pulses will be applied. And then throughout the entire SOC, or you can say that throughout the entire voltage region of the cell, like you can see from like 4.1 volts till about so almost like 2.5 or 2.6 volts, the entire resistance of the cell will be measured. Okay, that is the internal resistance of the cell using the same technique that we just now saw. Okay, so if we now observe like how the trend looks like, so the trend actually looks like this. So this is the variation of resistance and variation of both the ohmic and the polarization resistance with respect to SOC. Okay, you can expect this kind of a trend. Again, as like some sort of like a small experiment or like a small trial, I will provide you this file. You can take it with you, download it, and you can try this out as some sort of a small exercise. Yeah. So this is basically how the internal resistance of the cell can be obtained. Of course, like there is also ACIR. So there will be a separate webinar that will be held on this actually, where the other aspect of measuring the internal resistance, that is using DC current, that will also be like explored in a separate webinar. So yeah, this is like, so this is, we come to the end of the webinar here with all aspects of covering the internal resistance is done.